What's up, everyone? It's Gabby Trades here, and welcome back to the channel. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different and honestly super exciting. We have someone very special joining us live, and we're diving into a topic that have never even considered or talked about, which is called astrology. Now, here we're not talking about horoscopes or zodiac memes. We're talking about financial astrology and how planetary cycles can align with markets. Tops, cycles, crashes, whatever you can think of, even economic policy. So make sure to smash that like button as this show is going to be super mind blowing. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you never miss out. So, my guest today is not going to be a secret. His name is Samah. He's a financial astrologer who's made some bold predictions that have actually come true, including the FTX collapse and major turning points in crypto and stocks. So, to be honest, I personally follow his work for years. And as someone who has a very deep interest and knowledge on the topic, I can say that his work is extremely impressive and that he is someone definitely worth following throughout your trading journey. And for that, you guys, as usual, make sure you drop below over here in the video, in the description box. Click more, and then you can find Samah's YouTube main channel, his website, where you can find way more for what he does, his services. His Twitter page is also here, as well as my main channel and my Twitter. You guys make sure you check the description box down here for all this information. Now, so by the way, I can see there's a lot of skeptical people here, and if you're skeptical, right, you can be totally skeptical or already curious about how this whole thing works and how this energy can affect money flow. This conversation, in my opinion, is totally going to open your mind. So we're going to talk about Bitcoin, altcoins, central banks, and even the future of the global finance through the astrological lens. So you guys grab your drinks, make sure you hit the like button, and let's explore something markets from a completely different angle. I think is going to be very, very amazing. So here we go. Hello, Samah.
Hey Gabby, what's up, everybody? It's good to be on. And yeah, like Gabby said, there can be a lot of skepticism with this topic, and that's actually good. I personally love that because when you understand how markets work, it's all about having an edge, right? You either have like a speed edge because you're using like quant technology or high frequency trading, right? Or you have an information edge, right? You've got some alpha from Wall Street, and I'm a New Yorker myself, so I grew up with kids that work for some of these big firms, and I actually get to look at some of their internal reports, and that's just me being lucky. But that's an information edge, right? You get some info before everybody else, right? And if you don't really have an edge, then you're kind of just a typical retail trader, right? Maybe you're on Reddit, maybe you're watching Jim Cramer, for crying out loud, or whatever it might be. But the information you're getting might not be up to date. And so in those situations, you might be somebody else's exit liquidity, right? Who's moving on to the next thing. And so that's why I kind of like skepticism, right? Because if you are having a thesis or an inkling in terms of where the market might go, and you can kind of verify that with what we call confluence, right? Using a bunch of different tools to see if that supports how you're looking at things, then you got a bit of an edge. And then from there, it's about managing risk. If you don't know what risk management is or how to manage risk, there's nothing I can do or anyone can do to help you. There's no crystal ball you can rub. There's no genie you can pray to. If you don't know how to manage risk, if you don't understand risk reward and putting money behind bets that'll serve you, then the odds just won't be in your favor no matter what you're looking at, right? So how does all this astrology? Yeah, absolutely, right? So how does all this astrology stuff work? Well, it's like anything in life, you guys. Like there's good and bad in every field. And if you think about it, whether it's dentists, doctors, the best basketball players, musicians, or whatever, to be really like just straight with you guys, most people aren't really that good at many things, to be fair, and not to be offensive, but like to find people who are really, really good at something, it usually takes what did Malcolm Gladwell say? It's like 10,000 hours to be really
10,000 hours, yes.
In some cases, 20,000 to master something, right? So the amount of astrologers, particularly even those who dive into finance, who are really good at this, it's slim to none, right? Like you and I both are
Yeah.
familiar with a lot of, like, we can name the astrologers who are really good in the world today
Yes.
on both our hands. It's a very limited number, and I would say that that's probably the same for almost anything. You know, whether it's like the best F1 racers or Olympians. We're
Yeah.
talking about a limited group of people. So if you guys have had negative experiences with astrology, or if you've seen pop astrology on Instagram or whatever, and it wasn't very accurate, of course, right? I would say it's the same for almost anything. Like most of the restaurants in your neighborhood, probably you only have a couple of favorite ones, right? So that's just how things go in the world. There's that 80-20 Pareto principle of those who are really good. It kind of skews towards particular
Yeah.
niche of people. And so I'm not saying that I'm the best at this. I'm just saying that the amount of people who actually look at finance and astrology, it's a very small
Very
group.
limited. Yeah.
Very
Very small group.
And then what I
Yeah,
do on
it's
top of that, go ahead, please.
no, I say it's something that's extremely niche. And I've seen astrology, right? I studied astrology for my entire life. You know very well that I'm very interested in the subject. But particularly in astrology, it is just astrology and finance is such a niche topic. And it does relate because we have planets in astrology, we have signs in astrology that are ruling finance. So I'm really curious, how are you going to explain to someone who has no idea, like where would you start? Would you start with, like, I don't know, Cancer, for example, rules money, or Taurus rules money? Like how would you explain that to someone?
Well, first of all, I think it's helpful to even take the word astrology out of the picture, because every time we
Okay.
hear a word, we have certain connotations to it. And that's going to be related to the experiences we've had in the past. The
Okay.
thing about how astrology really works is that there's cycles. And there are a lot of people who analyze markets who are familiar with cycles. And so some of the cycles they don't even know actually are correlated to astrological planets and movements themselves. They don't know that. They don't even need to know that. All they need to understand
Yeah.
is how the cycle works. We got the business cycle, we got demographic cycles. A lot of these things correlate to the movements of the planets. But the correlation doesn't even matter. So if we just talk about it in terms of cycles, it might make more sense, right? The
Okay.
moon,
Yeah.
the moon rises and it basically grows, and then it looks like it's shrinking, right? And that's a 28-day cycle. And there's some people, analysts, who even look at this with the charts to see how the market moves up and down, and it kind of has a similar ebb and flow. A lot of markets will follow the moon, depending on, like you mentioned, the sign of Cancer, which I'll dive into in a little bit. But looking at it in terms of cycles is very helpful, and looking at this in terms of weather, I think, is very helpful as well. I compare it to, like, if you're a sailor, right, and you're setting sail,
Hmm.
that's your skill set, right? Your ability to set sail and sail your boat is on you, just like trading is on you, right? But before you set sail, you might consult with somebody who's good at reading the weather to see if the winds are going to be favorable for your trip. And that's really how this works.
Wow.
That's how you're looking at the cycles as well. Like, where are we in the business cycle? Where are we in the inflation cycle? Where are we in terms of policy? Are they more likely to cut, or are they more likely to print? Financial astrology is yet another layer of cycles for us to see, are things more prosperous, or are they going to be a little bit crunchy or tough? And when we layer all that together, that's how I build a thesis, and I trade with my investments and swing trade that way. I don't use it for day trading. I think that technicals and other forms of trading are better for day trading
Yeah.
personally, because the personal planets, they tend to move a lot quicker. The moon in particular, it's actually correlated to
Hmm.
the word lunatic and lunacy. And I think you can kind of lose your mind trying to figure out how markets are going to move on a minute to minute basis, trying to use the planets. So I think it's better for longer term stuff, right? But again,
Yes.
this analogy of, like, are the winds favorable? I think that makes more sense, right? And so this can be seen on a personal level by looking at an individual's chart. This can be seen for a particular asset, like if you have the birthplace and the location, the time of when a company was created, or a stock or IPO. This can be seen for countries, and this can be seen for the whole world as well, which I'll share with you guys in a little bit. And so I take a look at all those charts in addition to the technicals. And yeah, it's all charts to me. I'm basically a chartist, whether it's an astrologer chart or technical chart. We're looking at charts for confluence to help us make good decisions. And we use these cycles to see where we are in history, right? And that's what helps us understand where we are in the real world, right? So one of the charts I shared, maybe you saw this in the interview I did with Lada earlier this year,
Yes.
showed difficulty in the Trump presidency for the next 4 years in America. And so then we look into like, okay, well, what could be the things that cause that, right? And one of the things I talked about is the planet Mercury, which has a lot to do with commerce, communication, trade, markets trading itself, legal agreements. It showed tensions between America and other nations, and even also internally related to debt problems. And so one of the predictions I made is that we probably see Trump arguing with Powell about how he needs to cut rates and how there will be basically a money printing event later in 2025 that pushes markets higher. And that I was able to make that prediction by understanding how the market actually works by combining where we are in the larger cycle. Because again, when the rates were hiked up at the end of 2021, that made America's bills very expensive. And how are we going to pay for that? Well, we need to make cheaper money and make it more abundant for America to pay those things off, because the government doesn't go to work to earn money like a normal everyday person.
Yeah.
Right. So if America doesn't want to default on its debt and collapse and not be the world's greatest superpower, why would we do that in 2025 when we can just print money? This is the year to print money. And the cycles show us that. You know, there's cycles I've been sharing with my my newsletter, which I'll share the link to that later on, that show that this is the year 2025 cyclically, which correlates, the number 5 does correlate to the planet Venus, things that are beautiful and harmonious. There's an analyst called Sven Heinrich who's even shown this, like for some reason, every 5th year of the decade seems to be very bullish. Right. But you and I know, there's some planetary correlations to why that might be. And so here we are, you know, that big, beautiful bill or whatever you want to call it has passed. And now, as you're familiar with, the liquidity lag is 10 to 12 weeks. And we'll talk about how I see that playing out. But we should see things push higher as predicted, because that's where we are in the cycle.
I mean, for me, it's quite fascinating, to be honest, to like see how all the planets actually are correlating to what's happening right now, and to see how President Trump won the presidency when Jupiter was in Gemini, which is his sun sign. I knew, even though Kamala Harris had her ascendant in Gemini, so I was like, okay, ascendant. But then you have the sun always wins, right? So it was just very interesting to see that. And obviously Jupiter as the planet of expansion and growth and the biggest of them all made him win, in my opinion. He had a huge advantage over there. But yeah, talking about Jupiter, right? I'm really excited because Jupiter is now moving into Cancer. And I think that this is going to be also super beneficial for this cycle. Can you explain to us how that relates?
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's definitely talk about Jupiter. So what is Jupiter? Jupiter is basically the largest planet that we can see from the visible eye from Earth itself without a telescope, depending on where it is in the sky. And it's considered to be really this gentle, beneficial planet of blessing, growth, and expansion. It's a gas giant planet. And so a lot of the things that we see are, when we're talking about astrology, have a lot to do with correlation and symbolism and understanding how these symbols play out. So I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about the elements so that this makes more sense to people who are like, what the hell is all this? So we have a ball of fire in the sky called the sun, right? Fire. That's right? We live on Earth, right? The trees come out of the earth, food, plants, all that comes from the soil, the earth. That's another element. Then we have the air, which I'm using to breathe and talk and communicate. You know, Wi-Fi is passed through the air. It's a very techie kind of energy and has a lot to do with communication. So now we've got another element, air, and then we've got water that we drink, that we swim in, right? So that's element number 4, water. And all this exists in space, or what the ancient Vedas would call the Akash, the ether, ethereum. Oh, interesting, right? So
Yes.
all these elements, these 4 elements, though, earth, air, fire, and water, they have behaviors or characteristics. And these characteristics are considered to be phases: beginning, middle, and end. So these 3 phases and these 4 elements are what create the 12 zodiac signs, which are basically like spaces in the sky, or environments in which, when the planets move in and out of them, the planets either have easier or harder times exhibiting their behaviors. So think about you. If you want to work out and get in shape, is that going to be easier to do in an ice cream parlor or in a gym with a bunch of workout equipment, right? So the planets have things they're trying to do, but the environments they enter really support or make those efforts difficult. And so that's where we get ideas of where are humans in the cycle in terms of prosperity, war, abundance, relationships. We're getting to now understand, okay, things can be easier or more difficult for the planets, just like they are for people during these times. So that's why Gabby's excited about Jupiter. And Jupiter, interesting enough, was retrograding when Trump got elected for his second term. But why we're interested about Jupiter, the planet of expansion, is because it grows things. And so might Jupiter be in a place where markets or finances might be growing or expanding? And that's what we're going to take a look at. So we're actually going to take a look at America's chart, since we all they run the reserve world currency. So we're all very concerned about what's happening with America, what's happening with America's chart. Is there going to be a money printing event like Samah mentioned, right? And so you're seeing all these squiggly patterns and lines and all this stuff, right? But we have an idea now that each of these locations are either going to be correlated to one of the elements, and it's going to be a beginning, middle, or ending phase of that energy. So in this inner circle here, maybe let me back out of that first so that you guys can, well, let me leave it. So this inner circle here is going to be basically where the planets were positioned when the Declaration of Independence was signed. And so this gives us an idea of America's overall energy. And the planets you see on the outer wheel here talk about where the planets are right now, July 31st, and how that's affecting America's chart right now. So what Gabby was talking about is this kind of 4-forked symbol here. That's Jupiter. And it's near the sun sign here in this 8th place, this 8th location in America's chart. The 8th place, the 8th house in a chart is very interesting because it has to do with shared resources, and it has to do with vitality. When this 8th place is impacted positively, that chart, that company, person, energy, place, location, whatever we're talking about, the chart that's representing that thing, that area of vitality gets sparked in the sense of you might be getting energy from people, places, or things outside of you, like financial markets, like a spouse, somebody you're married to, like a bank. This is talking about getting energy from sources outside of yourself. This also has to do with like the transmutation of like sexual energy and marriage and things where it's like really important ties that can really boost you or take away from you. Right. So this in a negative sense can be like, your vitality is being, taken away from a person, place, or thing. We might see like an illness or like debts being taken out or something. It really depends on what planetary energies are impacting that 8th place.
It's also the house of death and rebirth, essentially.
Absolutely. And transformations and things that can be very sudden or very shocking. So big events happen when this 8th house gets impacted. And as we discussed earlier, Jupiter is a beneficial, expansive energy of blessing and growth and prosperity. So if the 8th place has to do with markets and energy that's shared with others, and Jupiter wants to bless and expand the areas it goes into, that can make a little bit of sense why your altcoin portfolio might be jumping up a little bit, why we have the S&P at all-time highs, we have Bitcoin at all-time highs. We have all these markets right now in America. This is America's chart, remember. All these American US indices that are doing quite well right now. And not only that, we have this symbol here at 0 degrees, which just moved into this 8th place, this 8th sign of Cancer here in America's chart as well. This symbol is Venus. So Venus is that feminine, juicy, beneficial energy of things that we enjoy. It has to do with like food, luxury, sex, enjoyment, nice things, things that we desire. Really, it's the planet of what we desire. Okay. So desirable things now are going to be able to be accessed for America or for American indices through charts, through markets, through sharing, through partnerships and agreements. And so this is what we're seeing while these planets are moving through here. And what will happen is once these planets leave, you could say that that part of the cycle is over, and that what those planets will try to do will bring their, their talents or their energies to the 9th house and the 10th and the 11th and so on and so forth. And when the planets make their movements, they'll have easier or harder times doing what it is that they want to do. Why Gabby's so interested about Jupiter in the 8th, though, is that now remember, planets have places where they do very well and where they don't do so well. Cancer, where you see these kind of blue, like, I don't know what you call these, like sideways 6s and 9s here. The sign of Cancer here, when it comes to Jupiter, again, it's a gas planet. It likes to expand. Cancer is a watery sign, and it's the first phase of water. So it's a phase of water in which it's active. And Jupiter really loves being here. It's considered a place of boost, of exaltation, a place of where Jupiter's energies are almost supercharged, like a computer that's overclocked, or like something that, like a Lambo with some superchargers in it that are going super fast, right? Like it's an area where Jupiter's ability to expand and grow things become hyper powered. So what does that mean? Well, one of the predictions that I didn't make the video yet, but we can even, maybe I'll switch charts here. Go ahead and stop the share. We can get into some technicals now.
Sure.
Because like I mentioned earlier, because even, let's talk a little bit about Mercury, right? Because something a lot of people are familiar with astrology, even though they don't know it or not, is Mercury, right?
Mercury retrograde is what everyone is familiar with. Yes, especially the girls.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And it's very appropriate because this collaboration between Gabby and I, like we've been talking about doing this all year. But of course, now we're doing it during a retrograde, and Mercury again has to do with communication. Mercury has to do with friendship too, commerce, trading, all of that, as we discussed. But what is Leo about? So Leo is a fiery element, which you guys probably have guessed, even though you're not experts in astrology, you probably could have guessed that. And Leo has to do with a fixed phase of fire. So it's this steady burning fire, right? It's not a fire being sparked. It's not a fire that's changing forms. It's this fixed, steady fire. And it correlates to kingdoms, right? It correlates to speculating, right? So what we bet on, what we believe in. It correlates to the heart and the spine and the body, actually, the Leo. Each zodiac sign actually correlates to different parts of the body, which, that's kind of outside of our topic for today. But it has to do with children, hobbies, fun, and kingdoms, right? And so if Mercury is retrograding, which means it's moving slower than normal, that means then and when a planet's moving slower than normal, right? And we know now planets are trying to do things as they're in signs. So if the planet of commerce and trade is moving slowly through the sign of what we believe in, what we speculate in, what we bet on, what our hobbies are and our kingdom, then we are meant to be rethinking, right? Trade and speculation, things we've bet on, right? And so a lot of us have speculated that we might be expanding our kingdoms by buying altcoins, right? And so, this is live. Let me know in the chat if this is what you're going through personally, or if this is something you agree with, right? Because this is very real. Yes. A lot of you are very skeptical about this, right? So this is a global energy. If you're into crypto and you're into altcoins, you're probably feeling this. You're probably seeing your portfolio move a little bit, and you're wondering, should I exit here? Is the top in? I've been wanting altcoins to go up and expand my kingdom, Mercury retrograde in Leo. But is it going to happen now, or should I exit at a loss? And so this is why this is something that we can all observe together. Jupiter and Venus being
Yes.
considered some of the luckiest, most beneficial planets. You saw Venus just went there. Jupiter still has room to go. Just so you guys are wondering, Jupiter will be in this area that it's in America's chart till about June of next year. So that means from a cyclical perspective, from a financial astrology perspective, that the bull run cannot possibly be over. Now, as we said earlier, that's just one of many things to look at, right? We've got technical analysis, we've got all types of things you guys can look at. But this is an area of debt, right? An area of money. So this big, beautiful bill is a money printing bill. It just got passed. That liquidity has not moved through the markets yet, which makes sense, right? We still see that Jupiter wants to expand things for a while until about next year. Am I saying the bull run? Am I saying sell in June? No, I'm not saying that. Personally, I'll be out of the market way before June. We can get into that.
Let's talk about that. Actually, I think a lot of people would be interested to hear, like, what is your view in, for example, Bitcoin tops, or which assets do you think would potentially thrive through this phase? Right? Is it gold? Is it crypto? Is it silver? Is it real estate? What do you think is going to be the one that's going to do so well during this cycle?
So real estate is interesting, right? Because Cancer has to do with nourishment. Water signs in general have to do with nourishment. And so Cancer has to do with real estate. And Jupiter wants to expand that. So what that can look like, it's going to be a myriad of things, right? You could see the supply of houses increase. Is that a good thing for prices? That affects supply and demand in a way where now you're increasing the supply. So if there's more homes, that's not necessarily a good thing for prices per se. But real estate is so particular that if you're in an area where, let's say, supply hasn't increased, but now you have rate cuts, right? That might be an area in the world where you do see home prices go up for a little bit. So it really depends on where you're at, but we will see the housing supply increase. And I think we will see the ability for people to purchase homes, at least in America, be increased or supported until June of next year. I could see it being more difficult after that, right? I could see it where not only are there rate cuts, it's easier for people to refinance and do things like that, where it's easier to get into a home. But depending on where you're at, home prices may stay the same. They might go up a little bit. And if the supply is high, home prices might even go down. But I think getting a home in general is more of what we'll see for Americans and just people in general too throughout the world. But again, that's only till June of next year. Now, in terms of other markets, right, what will really be supported here is that when we go into what's happening with the amount of money that's being printed, this is really being driven by Donald and how he moves markets, right? And what he's trying to accomplish, and also where we are in the cycle is very similar to 2020, 2021, very similar. So with the amount of money that's going to hit markets, which again, Jupiter being in this sign of exaltation, we should see money that we don't typically see getting printed. Like it should be almost extreme, So one of the charts, let me go ahead and pull it up here, is how high the altcoin market might even go in particular. Right.
The altcoin market has been such a journey for us this year. We've expected it to outperform everything, and a lot of people have bet really heavy on an altcoin season, but we didn't see that unfold. In fact, we just had a little bit of a jump, if you remember last year during the October last quarter of the year. And then after that, we started creating, with the really bad altcoins, like we were creating bottoms, like new lows, and the stronger ones obviously held. So I think all of us in the audience here, we're very interested to hear what do you think? Like, what do you think about the cryptos like XRP, for example, Ethereum? What do you think about the stable coins? I've heard you talking about the central bank's digital currency as well. So yeah, if you can touch on these topics, I think people really appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's zoom. So part of why I really like talking about the mechanics of what's happening with the market is so that people understand why we're being affected the way we have. When we came
Yeah.
out of 2021, we had inflation at 8%. Nobody was working. I mean, not nobody, but a lot of people were forced not to work and were kind of given money to stay at home, which really affects the supply and demand side of things, which is why inflation was so high. So what the game was after that was we need to repress people from being financially abundant. That is what governments were doing to us. And so that is why, in part of the design, part of the game is you can't have altcoins ripping in that type of a world. And so you can even see this in terms of how the crypto total market cap played out. Right? You can see that in terms of in the 2020-21 cycle, we had moments where, so this is excluding Bitcoin here, where we were able to have run-ups with altcoins and pullbacks, run-ups and pullbacks, run-ups and pullbacks. But since the bottoming of the altcoin market from the FTX collapse, we've seen a little bit of that. But when we take a look at Bitcoin dominance, what we see is that it's been a very different story. The 2021
Yeah.
run, and even in the 2017 run, which again, very Bitcoin dominant, but we saw that first initial run with ICOs becoming very popular. This has just been churning up to where it's only been Bitcoin that's really been moving up here. And why is that? Is that this cycle has really been a lot about scaring people away from crypto. And then once the administration flipped, it became very bullish in terms of, oh, now we have the Genius Act. And during this whole time, it was institutions learning the micro strategy, way of doing things. How do we finance? How do we get Bitcoin into our own treasury? How do we set up with that? So this whole time, retail was being scared with uncertainty, and altcoins really had no narrative for people to really be pushed in to the market, nor did we even have much money. Like one of the big reports that if you were able to see is like retail's, how much money did people have in their bank accounts and what's credit card spending looking like? And so during this whole time period, those numbers were abysmal compared to these previous runs. So this is a cycle in which this is the least amount of money people have had, and governments were able to really pull off that financial repression game. But that's over now. Literally with the passing of this bill, the liquidity is already starting to come in. We can see now that Bitcoin dominance has broken this average here. It's retesting a little bit. So this is where we'll get into a little bit of the financial astrology of what's coming up, is that, again, now Venus, which we talked about, is a planet of money, is going to go into a square aspect with Saturn, which has a lot to do with rejection and difficulties. And we're in the middle of a Mercury retrograde, which in the middle of Mercury retrogrades, we typically see pullbacks. That was even something that, what's his name? Brent Johnson, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He came up with like this dollar milkshake theory. He was joking about this last year when they had this Japan event that really pulled back in markets. And so in the middle of Mercury retrograde, sometimes we can see this type of event where markets kind of come back and they reverse their direction. And it's after the retrograde is over that we can see markets move in a direction in which they continue the pace that they were going. So what does that mean is we might see Bitcoin pull back here, revisit this average, come back to 110. We might see markets sell off, people taking profits until the retrograde ends around August 9th. And then we see things getting really bullish for the rest of the month.
That's interesting. I kind of agree with that view because as I was talking to my community the other day, I really see the market just doing whatever the hell it wants, staying in a range and potentially exiting the range to the downside up until the second week of August. And that's not even consulting astrology, really. It's just looking at the charts. It seems like it's going to be the second week of August.
Yeah, and I could see Bitcoin dominance in that scenario making one more push up here, maybe under this, it's not going to break over 72% here, but it might try to retest, this 70% range right there. And if you see your alts going down and you're like, this runs over, I quit, that would be just what the market makers want you to feel, type of thing.
Exactly.
And that could be an opportunity where, and if you see kind of the date that I'm looking at here, this could be in September. And why do I mention September? Well, eclipses. Eclipses are very interesting to financial astrologers. If you take a look here, March 13th and March 14th, if you remember March of this year, a very difficult time in markets, wasn't it?
Very,
Right.
yeah.
And what happens in eclipse season is about a week, sometimes 2 weeks prior, we can see very volatile, shaky activity in markets. And so I would not be surprised if a week, maybe even 2 weeks, probably a week, the first week of September, even as we get close to this date. And you can see that this one is over Europe, Asia, North America. So we're going to feel this one, particularly in the EU, but also in the Americas. I would not be surprised if we see, and I'm saying markets are probably going to run higher after the retrograde throughout August. I would not be surprised if we see a pullback here. And that might be where we see Bitcoin dominance make that final jump up. And so if you're holding alts and you feel like, man, I'm never going to see the light of day with my altcoins, that might be the last opportunity really to get positioned before we make a push down and kind of have this escalating fall that you've seen in 21 and in 17. And so that's kind of what we altcoin holders are waiting for. Once you guys start to see that descent down to the 40 range, you can see that this bottoms out and starts churning up again, right? So it's not going to last forever. You guys take your profits and get ready for the bear and get positioned. That's how I'm seeing things.
Do you think that the bull run is going to continue up until next year? I know you mentioned that you're looking at Jupiter, but I'm sure there is a lot more to that. But do you think that the altcoin season or the bull season in general is going to last until like next year? And to what point? When are you planning to exit? Just tell us.
I'll be out of the market next year for sure.
Yeah.
And then to be very. So Jupiter will be out of this area that it's in by June of next year. And typically what we see, not typically, but you guys have all heard the phrase sell in May, right? So there's some seasonality to markets. These are other cycles I look at, is what's going on with the seasonality of where things are. If you look at Bitcoin's 4-year cycle, typically what we see is very strong Q4s. Sometimes we see strong Q1s, right? So I'm seeing that coming into play and being a factor here. And from how I look at cycles and how I'll be playing things is I will be using that area to make some exiting out of my positions. One of the things that are really important, though, like I said, in terms of what's going on with the mechanics and the market and finances, the end of the game, what causes the musical chairs to stop is always the thing. It's inflation. That is the final nail in the coffin. So that is something that you guys, in terms of, I don't believe in any of this financial astrology nonsense. What are the things I should be looking at? Like for real is look at inflation. What is the Fed saying about it? That's the mandate that they must look at in accordance with unemployment too. So if all this money is being printed and it's going to push assets higher, well, the party has to stop when the inflation gets to a point where people are being choked to death. And so that is something to look at next year, is when Jupiter starts to make its exit, we'll probably have very, very high inflation, or very unbearable inflation in the country at that point. So you don't need to go nuts about timing. The top, I think, is very dangerous, period, is what's your strategy for taking profits as the market moves higher? And how high can this thing go? We can pull up fibs, that's something you've probably done with people, but if you guys know how to do Fibonacci retracements, you've probably seen that 170K is an area where, all right, maybe I should be taking some profits here. How high can this thing really go? Maybe 200K tops. And then if we go into a super cycle thing, well, I guess it could go to 500, but the odds of that, we'd really need to see a lot of money printed this year for that to be the case. And so rewinding back, if this bull run started in 2022, at the end of this FTX collapse, we've had 2023 for the market to build. We've had 2024 for the market to build. Now we're in 25. And now we're going to see trillions of dollars printed. So for those of you who know how market tops go, they're usually parabolic. So I'm looking at this market as we're at the end here. This is this parabolic blow off phase in which once that liquidity comes through, unless there's another liquidity event coming from central banks, what's going to push the market higher after that? So this is where we look at the different cycles, right? And kind of figure out, okay, well, it's probably going to be earlier next year than later that this thing finishes up, right?
Wow. Yeah. So yeah, for me, I resonate with that reading, to be honest, because I also look at the markets in cycles and not necessarily look into financial astrology for an extra confluence when I do that, because I use the technical specifically. So I tend to look at the market and the year obviously in quarters. And then I try to follow that, obviously, with a lot of the fundamentals, just like you do. And to me, it seems like right now is going to be a period of consolidation for the summer. And then I am expecting, again, together partnered with the seasonality, of course, Q4s tend to be strong. So I am expecting this year to be one of these years. And then for me, if I have to do a prediction, I'd say that I want to be out of the market by February next year. And the funny thing is that I correlate that to what happened before in the markets, what I've seen happening before. And also I correlate it to Chinese astrology. Yeah. Here's a tip over there for you. So yeah, that's pretty much how I'm looking at the markets this year. And it's interesting. I really would be surprised if the bull run continues up until like June. Right? I'll be very surprised. But I think even if I exit like around February, in my opinion, like I'll be fine. For me, what I'm most worried about is like all these altcoins, right? That everyone is like bleeding so bad. And, we're at a point where, okay, we just want out, or are we going to get 20x? Are we going to get 100x? I've realized that's probably not going to be the case. And that,
I'll share my thoughts on that. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And so to add to that, I completely agree. I was being a little vague about that in terms of when I'll be exiting. I think February is a good date to put on your calendar. I do not think we will go till June. I was just explaining though that is a cycle. Jupiter cycle ends in June, so that's one of many cycles to look at. But yes, get Gabby's point, she's looking at many things that have led her to the conclusion that February is when she wants to be out. I would say, in terms of alts, we might see alts performing into February, but the seasonality of Bitcoin is usually that it's done a little bit earlier than February. Again, you guys do your own research.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think it's quite fascinating. And also, I am, as a Gemini, of course, I'm interested in the fact that Uranus is going into Gemini. That's such a big planet that takes so many years to change signs. So I'm really excited about that. And do you think that is going to have any impact on the financial astrology as well?
Absolutely. It already has. My prediction, I do yearly reports every year. And one of the predictions I made in that report is that when Uranus enters Gemini in 2025, that we will see a resurgence in tech stocks, AI, and those types of things. And we're seeing that in real time, which makes sense because it's really the quote unquote Magnificent Seven that lead the United States economy. There are tech companies. Right. And so Uranus and Gemini is really saying that, okay, those sectors of the market, the riskier assets on the risk curve, crypto, these things will be the things to kind of lead us in the end of the bull market rally. All right. So this is not necessarily the time to be in your conservative assets or companies to make the most amount of money as this thing fizzles out. It's going to be
correct.
It's going to be altcoins again. It's going to be the things that haven't been doing as well. But this is the end of the cycle, which is why these things are are likely to perform. So this is the crypto total market cap excluding Bitcoin. And we're going to do, I'm not a technical expert, but I am a technical analyst. And I enjoy looking at the charts. And what I'm really looking at here is, you can see we're at 1.45 trillion for the total market cap excluding Bitcoin right here. And this guy I have up here is known as the stochastics RSI, which talks about momentum. And what momentum really covers is, it's like, if you've ever driven a car, right, it's easier to go faster when you're already going fast. It's this whole principle of inertia and speed, right? Versus like when the car's fully at a stop, you have to really push down on the pedal to get things moving. So when we're above the 50 level, this is telling us that the buying momentum, the way the market wants to go, is to the upside until we get overbought. And it's the same thing when we're below the 50 level, is the momentum wants to push lower. And you can see right here for the altcoin market is we're right at the middle here, and we're wanting to go over. We've got this blue line, which is a faster average that's already over the 50 level. But we're here at a spot, and we can see we're rejecting around here at 1.5 trillion. This is an area of interest in which we topped out around here last December when Trump got, into office and people were really bullish around crypto. We topped out here at around 1.64 trillion and pulled back. And in the last bull run, when we had all-time highs and the altcoin run that people really liked, we topped out at 1.71 trillion in the altcoin market. So what we're looking at for altcoins to really perform, you guys, is, do we get above really a 1.6 trillion and do we stay there? This is a 2-week chart. Let me go out to a weekly view. And what you can see, for those of you guys who are familiar with technical analysis, you can probably see this being built here, is we got a little bit of what's called a cup and handle play. And this is a massive one that's really started from November 21. It's making like this big cup shape, and this handle is being put in here right here. You guys can Google cup and handle chart pattern. And what this will do is, let me draw a line here. What this will do here, if we can actually cover the distance from this high to this low, that's about $1 trillion.
So we can easily add that.
Exactly. Easily is an interesting word, right? And I think it will be easily because of how much money is needed to cover what the American economy needs to cover in terms of covering its debts. But basically, this whole move down, you guys, from a technical perspective, if we can get above 1.6 and spend some time there, we should see the equal and opposite reaction to the upside, which would push things up to about like 2.6 trillion dollars in altcoins. That's excluding Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of freaking money for alts. And that's money we have not seen in alts in a long time. That's going to catch a lot of people off guard. If we do get that move, I'm not guaranteeing anything, you guys. I don't guarantee anything. Right. But from a technical perspective, we are at a place where things are compressing to a point where something wants to happen. And if we can get that upside move, then we'll see, the glory that you guys are hoping for in your portfolio. Or it could reject and go to the downside if we get some bad news. But again, this is a money printing bill that has passed. We just need to wait for the liquidity at this point. And from there, it's when are we taking profits? How do we time this? How do we exit this? And, like I said with Gabby earlier, unless there's more liquidity coming next year, which I don't know why there would be, particularly because the amount that's coming is going to be quite inflationary. This is the time to really take the next couple of months seriously and take profits and manage them wisely. That's how I'm looking at it. And it sounds like that's how you're looking at it too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited. A lot of people are tired. I'm tired myself, but it's pretty much now or never. And I feel like they want us to get completely exhausted. I feel like a lot of people are already planning their exit of crypto by the end of this bull run. I've heard it so much, like people that have been, so early. They're like, I've had enough. I'm done. I've grown white hairs. I can't do it anymore. But yeah, that is not us traders, right? Because we as traders, we endure that kind of pain on a daily basis, like you said, with the moon cycles, lunatic cycles. So you guys, if you really like this content, make sure you like this video. And again, I'm going to share, make sure you drop down the description box of this video so you can find where you can follow Samah, his own YouTube channel, as well as my own YouTube channel. But yeah, Samah has a lot of videos, and I know that he's going to bring a lot more alpha to us. And you also offer personal financial astrology reports, right? I got one from you, which was very, very amazing. But again, I just wanted to ask you quickly, what's your view on gold and silver? Because I think that that's also very trending right now and people are interested.
Yeah, so it's kind of like an everything goes up market with the amount of money that's being printed. But what's interesting, and you actually, I know you watch his videos. I was talking to a friend of mine, Waters Above. He looks at different types of esoteric things, and he's actually showing me that gold actually doesn't really perform well during alt seasons, which was interesting because I am predicting we're going to go into an alt season, and the gold chart has done very well. So there might be a little bit of a, maybe 3 to 6 month kind of sideways movement in gold while alts perform well, which, if risk assets are outperforming, it might make sense for people to allocate a little more money to tech stocks and equities during this run. But overall, if you guys check out my older videos, you'll understand where I'm coming from. We're living through a sovereign debt crisis, which means your currencies, no matter what country you live in, are at risk. Your countries are having issues paying off their debts. So things like gold become more appealing, right? We've got a crazy orange man in the United States. People are very uncertain about his actions. So it's like, why not buy gold while the US figures out their nonsense, right? So that's what's going on with gold for the decade and for even longer. If you haven't heard of the fourth turning, maybe look into that. What happens during fourth turnings is a regime change, Bretton Woods moments type things. And we're seeing a little bit of that with Bitcoin and the United States government now being infused as a way to get people to buy US Treasury debt, right? So there's a lot of things going on with global economies in which they're scrambling to figure out how do we get people to buy our debts. They're not as interested in buying them as they used to. So in such an environment, gold almost has to perform well. It should be, and again, I'm saying should, I don't give financial advice, but gold should be a percentage of your portfolio. Will it be the best performing during this bullish phase? Probably not. The riskiest assets tend to perform the best during this phase, but gold is not going to fall off a cliff and end here. Gold is really beginning, in my opinion, an 8-year bull run, right? So there might be a bit of a pullback phase while we go into this euphoric phase with everything else. But gold and silver, to me, look very good for the long term, and I would even I would even use the next couple of months as an opportunity to scale in if you're considering staying here.
For sure. I agree with you. I'm a huge fan of gold and silver, particularly copper as well. I'm looking into copper. Yesterday, copper had a really bad day after Trump came out and decided to just bang tariffs out of nowhere on copper. And then within like 15 minutes, we got a minus 22% candle on copper, which was very disappointing. But yeah, I'm still, these are the assets that I look into a lot, commodities. And we have here one interesting question from Diamond Eyes. What coins do you hold, Samah? Or do you have any favorites?
So I've been holding a lot of Bitcoin, which makes a lot of sense. My altcoin portfolios, it's kind of, there's a lot of memes in there. It's kind of silly. I don't even want to go into some.
Oh, memes. Oh, God. Okay.
But I hold a lot of so I have different portfolios that I hold. My main one, though, is really comprised of US equities, Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And gold. Those are really, I think, the staples that for your serious portfolio, what you're going to hold your wealth in for this fourth turning that I'm describing throughout the decade, you guys, what I'm holding is like almost somewhere between 20 to 30% gold. Like I've got some silver in there. and I'll do like 50% equities, you know, and then there's a lot of commodities in there as well. So that's kind of how I look at things is US equities, gold, BTC. That's kind of my game plan until we get into 2032, 2033, which is when I'm thinking this fourth turning will really shift things in terms of do we have a Bretton Woods moment or not? So, like I said, I think gold is in an 8-year bull run. That's kind of how I'm, 2033 for many reasons. You guys can check out one of my older videos to know why I'm looking at that year, you know, but that's for the next kind of this whole Uranus and Gemini period, really. The next 7 years. Gold,
I guess.
US equities, that's the game, really.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I guess, you know, Uranus and Gemini is going to be a big thing. And, you know, I think all Geminis are going to have to be the shining superstars. So I'm very happy about that. And yeah, I know you don't like Donald Trump, but he's a Gemini, so you better like him. And
you think I don't like him?
Yeah, I think you don't like him.
I don't hate him. I don't like him. I look at all politicians the same.
The same, yeah. Okay, I do agree with that as well. Well, Samah, thank you so much for being here. I think this was like very enlightening. I hope that it was, you know, it gave a lot of interesting views to all of our traders over here at Coin Bureau Trading. But yeah, really appreciate that. And like I said, billionaires are looking into astrology, not millionaires, right?
Absolutely. She charts for a woman named Sonia Morgan. She's the wife of JP Morgan. So, like, you know, it's not like quite literally billionaires.
Quite literally. Of course. Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Again, really appreciate your time. And you guys make sure to subscribe to Samah's YouTube channel. You can find it under the description box here of the video. You just scroll down and you can watch all of his videos where you can learn about the fourth turning and everything else that he has to say, which is a lot. Well, Samah, thank you so much for being here. And maybe we'll have you again soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Gabby.
All right, darling. Thank you. Bye-bye. Whoa, you guys. Well, we've had the legend himself, right? He's giving actually advice to the wife of the CEO of JP Morgan. Like, that's insane. Well, I hope you found this useful. And to me, it is actually a very personal topic because I really love astrology from all angles. And I've been studying it like since I'm a kid. So yeah, the planetary impacts are huge. Eclipses can be very, very telling about the financial industry in general. And like I said, a lot of smart and intelligent people are looking into this. Yes, it looks a little bit complicated, but if you're reading, you know, like some newspaper, astrology, horoscope, or whatever, of course, it's going to be complete BS, just like everything, like we said in the beginning of this video. But thank you so much for being here, you guys. And I hope you had a great time. And I hope that this was very educational for you. And I will see you guys in the next one.